Okay, so this is probably the weirdest start to any of my videos, but I want to thank Solovyov for correcting a defect in my thinking about Vladimir Putin. You see, I've been thinking about Putin through Western eyes, through my own lens, and I see him as an evil dictator, the best analogy I could give is like a mafia boss who runs a country. And he acts in that way. And he really does act that way in many regards. But there's a reason that in Russia he has such high popularity. And I think it's not just because they live in fear and can't have an opinion, although that is part of the package. But there's also this effect where some people genuinely like him. And the older you are, the more you genuinely like Putin. And statistically, the older you are, the more you support him, the more you're consuming state-sponsored TV, as opposed to the younger you are and you're getting it from your computer. And that's why they're trying to lock down the VPNs, that sort of thing. So there's this effect where, you can bracket by age and find greater and greater support for Vladimir Putin. Now we're about to watch a little clip of Vladimir Solovyov talking about Putin on his birthday. This was just a few days ago, and remember, when you're watching Russian state TV, it's trying to project a message to the people, but it's also speaking to Putin at the same time. Okay, so we're going to watch this clip, and you'll see what I mean in just a moment. Today is a day when many publicly and on social media are congratulating the president of our country, our supreme commander-in-chief, with his birthday. Here is what I'd like to tell you. I've seen many leaders of our motherland. Now remember, Solovyov is in rarefied space. He's got to be in his 50s, okay? I'm 50 years old, and as a 50-year-old, I remember what it was like living with the Soviet Union. I remember Gorbachev pretty well, and I remember a few of the leaders before that. They get a little sketchier, but I remember Gorbachev and everyone from Gorbachev forward. So he's remembered some of the leaders of the Soviet Union, and then he remembers the Soviet Union's collapse, and then he remembers what happened for that time when Russia was really just floundering. Starting at a certain point in time, we started to feel a colossal shame for those people, for the Soviet leaders who used to lead us. But it so happened that Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin headed the country, and the frightening, merciless steamroller of history that was supposed to break down our country into a multitude of fragments suddenly started to malfunction and break down. Look, he's crediting Putin, set aside what he did, for restoring their hope, restoring their dignity, bringing them together. Now, I'm not saying this was a good way of doing this, but I am saying that this is something that older Russians particularly look to and say, yes, he brought us back together, he restored our glory, or he's working on restoring our glory. Shameful, terrible, horrible ways that he's doing it, like invading Ukraine, but this is the mentality, this is why they're thinking the way that they are. Suddenly, it backed off. We stopped losing territories and started gaining them. Remember, stop losing territories. What did they lose? What did the Soviet Union lose? Most of Eastern Europe. The Baltic states were part of Russia. Poland and Romania and Bulgaria and Czechoslovakia and Yugoslavia and all these other countries that were part of the glorious Soviet Union, regardless how evil the evil empire was, they're seeing this as a loss. We stopped losing these territories and started gaining them. And under President Putin, our population grew. Yes, it's because our compatriots came from Ukraine and people elected to live in Russia. So people were coming back to Russia. They were proud of Russia again. They wanted to be in Russia. And he restored a patriotic spirit. Under President Putin, we restored our military-industrial complex and our agriculture. We built the most modern city infrastructure. Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin is our supreme commander-in-chief. He is a man who made historic decisions, and people supported him. And I think there's some element of truth in what he's saying, that people did see him as a restoring figure. I think that the way that he handled the Chechen War, which he probably started, was part of that solidifying. And I think people, and clearly when he invaded Ukraine the first time, his popularity in Russia rose significantly. I'm not saying that was a good thing, but that is statistically what happened. And when he invaded the second time, his popularity did rise again in Russia. And so I think that there, there's an element where Russians are really honestly, truly feeling this. And so that just factors into my understanding of how to think about Putin. Not that he's just this evil mob boss, which he is, but that there is an element in Russian society that really truly values and believes what he's doing is good. It's right. And of course, Ukrainians don't believe that, and the West doesn't believe that. But I think the older that you are, the more likely you are to actually feel this, because he's brought back this, brought them out of the sense of shame and restored their dignity in some way. This personal trust to Putin exists because we have a total understanding that Putin hears the people. Well, I'm not so sure that this is completely true, but I think that there is an element that I missed. Putin feels that the people and the people repay with love for their supreme commander-in-chief. Happy birthday, Vladimir Vladimirovich. With this, our broadcast goes into a standby mode. Okay, that's the end. Good night. That's the end of what he had to say. Good wishes for Vladimir Putin, but I gotta say, I've missed that. I did not factor that into my understanding of how people thought about Putin. And I knew that statistically, the older you are, and I've been to 4 former Soviet, like Warsaw Pact or former Soviet countries. And I noticed this like strange phenomenon. The older people were, the more they were kind of like thinking, oh, well, the good old days in the Soviet Union, we miss that. I mean, because they had stability, and it was kind of like in the scripture, the Israelites wanting to go back to Egypt, right? It was that kind of phenomenon, and I always thought that was strange. But I think if you're of a certain age, that is perhaps the way that you think, and it's it's much more that than I factored in, even though it is a fear and don't cross me or there's reprisal simultaneously. Like these things are stacked one on top of each other, and I missed it. So Solyov, thank you. Even a broken clock gets it right twice a day, and I really do appreciate that you help me understand why people in Russia really do like Putin to some degree. Now, that doesn't mean that he's not still a mob boss. He kind of is. But this also is true simultaneously. All right, that's all that I have today. Tell me what you think about that. Am I off base? Did I read too much into that, or is there something really about what Solyov said that we need to factor into our understanding? Because if this is true, it makes it even less likely. Like Vlad Vexler talks about, the people are apolitical and they're not going to rise up. I don't believe that they're going to rise up either, but if this is true, there's even more evidence that they're not going to rise up and throw off Putin. Why would they? Would you throw off George Washington if you were an American? Probably not. All right, that's all that I have to say. Thanks for the likes, the shares, the subscribes, the coffees, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.